leave it to you from here. You go ahead, take it off, and off you
Yeah.
go.
Thanks, Doug. And you know what? I was going to do a little thing on condos, but I thought, I just had to change my mind last minute a little bit here. And maybe I'll talk a little bit, but I also want to keep it kind of open and flowing today. Just as I talk, just because I find maybe there's never really an opportunity someone just fire questions at me and such too as well. And that's always opportunity. But I want to kind of echo what you said, right? And I really do believe this as an industry, how we actually get involved. And people always ask me during an inspection or even after inspection, I have clients ask me all the time. And then they say things like, would you buy this house? What do you think of this house? What do you think? Should I get it? Or they reword the question, whatever phrase they want to say. And I always tell people relatively the same thing. And I honestly believe this is I would get any place for the right price. My job, like the house could be on fire. There's probably a good price for that too, as well, as far as I'm concerned. My job really in here is to kind of bring awareness to what you need to know, and then you can make an informed decision with your realtor and figure out, does this make sense? I tell people all the time, if you're overpaying for the house, $200 worth of fixes might be too much for you. I don't know, right? But if you're getting a good deal, I've done places before where it's like, they're paying 25-30% below market price. And it's like $250,000 worth of repairs probably, but it's still a good deal, right? They still go forward with it, right? So I think it's important to do that, to kind of know where you're at with a price point, your clients, of how they're going to kind of proceed with this. Sometimes I'll even ask like what kind of renovations are planning, because that can make a big deal. If they have their entire budget planned up for renovations and there's a little bit extra bit, then well, yeah, that might be a little bit of an issue, right? Another thing that's been coming up a lot lately is like older places. So places that are age, over 25 years old. I'm finding, especially in this market, a lot of people are going into properties and they're expecting kind of a 30-year-old property to come out like brand new. Okay. And that's a tough place to be, actually. And I really, a lot of times when I do inspections, I try to really set the expectation. And people kind of look at me a little bit like when I'm inspecting these sort of 30, 35 plus year properties and they're watching me kind of pick things out and stuff too. And I always try to tell people like, look, you have to understand something. Property that's 35 years has been lived in for 35 years, or at least a good majority of it. There are going to be things that need to get done. That's the reality of a 35-year-old property. But if you were to buy a brand new property, it'd be a different price point. That's why you get a 35-year-old property, because of this. And you kind of roll the dice a little bit on what needs to be done and what may not need to be done. And if you're lucky, not much has to be done, but you should be prepared just in case that something needs to be done, right? And my job is in here to make sure it's safe. Like you said, Doug, safe. It's not going to burn down on you. You're not going to have some sort of big swath of damage coming up that you can't predict, right? And try to put some context into it and such too. So I'm usually pretty easygoing when it comes to inspections. Nothing really phases me actually, because everything's really within context of the property and such too. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit about condos. I mean, condos is really, I mean, you were talking about strata minutes and stuff too. Condos is probably the majority of what we do. Just because there's a lot of condos in Lower Mainland. I see condos constantly. I'm going to 2 condos later today. It's always been interesting with condos because every time I do inspections for condos or talk about condos, there's always a small group of people, and they may not admit it, but there's a small group of people that always say like, there's no point in getting inspection on condos. What's the worst can happen, and so forth. And I get it because condos, the price point's different, strata gets involved, and there's a perception that the cost of what could go wrong is fairly minimal. And to some degree, that's true. It's a little bit different from houses, but to some degree, it's also not true. And anyone who's seen me in one of these presentations before has seen me talk about condos. Like there can be some pretty crazy stuff that happens. One of the more recent, I asked the realtor if I could tell this story. One of the more recent situations was there was a condo that was suspected had water damage behind the tile, and it wasn't what someone up in our team, by the way. So it's a condo that had water damage behind the tile, and so the tile needed to be repaired. But the problem with it was it's an older place. There was asbestos behind that bathroom tile, and so it was a $50,000 repair on the bathroom tile because of asbestos. It's pretty sizable, right? For a condo that's perceived to be, less costly and stuff too. But we want to try to get ahead of those things. Minutes, we were talking about strata minutes and stuff too. So I have to add a little bit. There's been some recent highlights from our association with strata minutes. So Doug's right. I will help with the strata minutes, but I have to be careful with them. Our association has been very forthcoming saying you got to be careful with reading strata minutes because a lot of our insurances don't cover us reading strata minutes and such too. So a lot of times when I read strata minutes, I'm trying to consolidate the information to make it understandable rather than really extract, if that makes any sense, like really interpreting the information and stuff too as well. So a lot of times when I read strata minutes, my goal is to pick out upcoming projects. So depreciation reports come in very useful in this within the next 5 years, and any projects that are over $100,000, which is usually anything less than $50,000 usually gets absorbed a little bit, or maybe there might be a small levy. And then you can try to figure it out through the entitlement of what your clients are exposed to and stuff too, right? So if strata minutes, usually I tell people give us a history of the building, of repairs and stuff too as well. But those that are dealing with inspectors might find it hard to try to get them to read strata minutes lately and stuff too, because that's kind of the push out of the association. I'll still do it if people ask me, of course, right? Because I want to know much about property and such too, but it's just something to be aware of out there, what the current climate is out there in our world and stuff too, right? So does anyone have any like questions they want to ask about inspections or situations that's happened recently? I feel like I've never really kind of opened the floor to situations or anything about inspectors that they noticed that out there and such too as well. Since we have, I don't know how many people we have in this room today. Looks like quite a few. I can dive into a little bit of a.
Paul's probably had some things going on, haven't you, Paul? You have any mortgages turned down because of inspections?
No,
Paul's the
well,
strange guy.
we don't usually see inspections. That's a client piece of information. Lenders want to see the appraisals. So the lenders don't get into the detail, inspections do. That's more for the peace of mind for the buyer.
Are you a
But
mortgage broker?
I am, yeah. I should
Okay.
figure out how to put a title next to my name. I tried to do that and I can't figure it out. So
Okay. Oh, I see your name now, Paul. Okay. I'll try to look around on the camera where your name, but it's in tiny little letters in the lower left corner. So, because usually your image comes up on camera.
He doesn't need a title. He has a mustache.
He has a mustache. All right. No, fair enough. Right. So
every time, every time. You'll get used to it, Mike.
yeah, I may be aged, but I never can seem to get it up there. So, so you know, it's interesting you say that, Paul, because you're right. For most cases, they don't, like, most people don't need a report. Our report's really just for the client. But there have been occasional times, and it kind of weirds me out when I get asked this, is the lender will ask for the inspection report. And it's very rare, very, very rare, right? And usually when I see that happen, it makes me think that there's some sort, like the lender has a suspicion about the property over something. Like they either don't believe the information that they're getting, or they see the information and they look at the pictures of the property and they think this place looks like junk. You know, let's get an inspection report and stuff too, right? Anyone do a lot of commercial lending or commercial transactions out there? Yeah, no, yeah. In the commercial world, which I'm actually working on two as we speak, the requirement for reports are a lot more common. They call them different. They call them property condition reports and such too. They have to be done in a certain guideline and such, right? So a lot of times where commercial lendings, the lender will ask for the commercial report on the property as part of their application process. So if anyone's looking at getting into the commercial transaction world, it'll be something you see a lot more often. Like I said, I'm working on two right now. I'm going to go to a third next week and stuff too. And they're a lot longer. They're a lot different. They're more expensive, obviously, because there's a lot more work involved in those and such too, right? So it's
well, don't they have environmental reports for those as well?
That's a separate thing. We can make it as part of our thing. We would get a consultant in to do the environmental report. They're called stage 1 or stage 2 environmental reports. But that is sometimes part of the financing process, and it depends what the property was originally. Like if the property was, say, like a dry cleaner, they may want a stage 2 environmental report, which if anyone in the commercial world ever gets asked to do a stage 2, the price for that is who knows? It depends. If you ever just stick with the stage 1, that's ideal. That's usually just a history of the property and then kind of a little bit of a site visit to figure out the gradient property stuff too. But you are right. A lot of financing does ask for environmental reports, either stage 1 or stage 2. Yeah, I did not expect that. Any other questions about things? I mean, I could show pictures and stuff too. Sorry. Normally have something a little bit more formalized, but we kind of got
Okay, don't
talking
worry
about this
about it.
stuff today. and
Rhiannon, you always got something going on, and Sonny, you guys probably had some shit shows with inspections and things
I
going
love shit
back,
shows.
sideways.
So
Well, complications.
complications. Well, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
And thanks for coming in. Sorry I was late. So for realtors going into, I'm gonna do a detached question and a strata question. Going into an older building or an older house, what are some of the things that they should be really taking a quick look at to see if the house has been updated? Should they go right and look at the electrical panel, see what kind of heat the furnace and all that kind of stuff is? And do they look around windows for moisture, just for little signs for their owners that this house seems to be good or seems to be not good? And for the newer ones, what should they be looking at for deficiencies in a newer build?
No, those are good questions, actually. We'll start with the older ones. For older properties, I always assume when realtors are going into properties, they don't like, especially for the first time, they don't have a long time. They have maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, unless they have a longer appointment, then they can do some investigation. So you have to do the quick things, right? Number one question I always ask for any property before 1965 is, has there been an oil tank scan done, or has there been oil tank removal? That is, to me, one of the by far most important things to do, just because of the sensitivity around it, and just what if there does turn out to be an oil tank, the far-reaching consequences it can have and such. Now, I also tell people, like, there's never, unless someone's actually physically pulled an oil tank out, there's never any guarantee that there's no oil tank with a scan. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of these situations, right? But it is the best you can do, short of taking an excavator to the backyard, which is just not going to be possible, right? So you kind of have to accept the scan on face value, but it is what you want to make sure there is and such too. Beyond that, there's a couple obvious ones. I always tell people, like, look, if you walk up to a house and it looks bad, it probably is bad. It's like you don't need me to like, if the roof looks bad, it's probably bad, right? So, but quick things to look at. I would look at, if you guys can find the main panel, look at the amperage on the main breaker and such too. That's usually a quick thing. If you can find that, if it's anything below 100, there's a very good chance that your client will have to do an electrical update on the property, just because anything less than 100 amps, you have lots of trouble getting insurance on. You can look at the heating equipment really quick. You can look at the furnace really quickly to see if it looks updated. You don't necessarily have to date it. If it looks old, it's probably old. If it looks new, it's probably new. But that will give you some information. These are just very quick 5-minute things to look at and stuff too. And beyond that, if you want to case the area, look for any cracks on the structure. If anyone knows what drainage tile is, if anything, that would be important. So if you see, if you go around the property and you see white pipes sticking up out of the ground, I don't know if they look about that pound and stuff too, that usually means they had some sort of drainage tile update. If they don't, it probably means they didn't have a drainage tile update. And if anyone knows anything about
Maybe
drainage
just
tile,
kind of explain what drainage tile is for a lot
Yeah.
of people who even know.
yeah, I was going to explain that, and I was going to. If anyone knows anything about drainage tile, it's a pipe system that's under the ground. I'm going to try to explain it simply. It's a pipe system under the ground that takes rainwater and basically groundwater drainage, basically moisture that falls from the outside, takes it away to the storm drains and such, so it doesn't put water pressure onto the house and drive it into the foundation, right? So in other words, it's a pipe system that prevents water going into the house. That's probably an easy way, and it's under the ground. Very difficult for us inspectors to see, but we can tell it's been updated by looking for the pipes that stick out of the ground, right? It's a difficult thing. I wish I had a picture prepared for this, because that might actually help, right? But it is a difficult thing to determine unless you know what you're looking for. But if you can even ask the question to any of the selling agents that are listing, they're sitting there, and say, has there been any drainage tile updates? Just those words, and they can tell you yes or no. That would be great, right? So, because I'm always very sensitive about those things too as well. What was the second question? Deficiencies. I'll be honest with deficiencies. To me, a lot of new builds, we'll take new builds as this, has a lot to do with the developer and their service level, right? I find that good people always ask me what are good builds and bad builds. Good builds to me are done from developers who are willing to work with their purchasers to perform repairs, right? The bad builds are usually done by developers who push back a lot from their purchasers, and they typically resist a lot of requests. And I find I end up going into a lot of what people perceive poor builds because the developers basically ghosted them at that point in time, right? And they've been a year down and they want to start documenting their deficiencies so they can start preparing for a claim. You know, a lot of times a good developer usually has a history, or they're larger corporations and such too. And these developers work well with their clients. It's a lot of smaller developers typically have a tougher time and such too. There are some things, I mean, it's really hard to quantify exactly what you're gonna look for because every build is very different. I've seen things where toilets are not connected properly. I've seen things where entire fridge plugs are forgotten, or windows, or there's literally water coming into the ceiling, right? Does that make it a bad build? Well, it makes it whoever that trade installed those probably made some pretty big mistakes. But if the developers want to go in, fix it, make it right and stuff too, that's a good thing, right? I mean, mistakes do happen. But that's really my perception. I hope that answers your question, Michael. That's really my perception on builds, is really just knowing the history of the developer, and are they going to be working well with clients and such too, right? So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome, right? So running a little bit against clock. Sorry, I didn't have anything much to show today, I guess, right? But is there any questions that I can answer for anyone else and such too?
Well, I guess back to the strata docs too. I
Yeah.
mean, the depreciation report, you could cover that, couldn't you? I mean, that's.
So the way I get around it is I do look at it, and I'll have a conversation about it and answer questions about the information about it and stuff too, right? Like I said, like there. So here's how it's going down right now is our association provides insurance coverage to many of the inspectors that belong to the association. I actually don't get my insurance coverage through the association. I get it out separately. So I'm a little bit of a can still do things that others can't and such too. So that's why I'm still able to look at it. This was a little bit more of a information out there that if people are going out to other, getting their own inspectors and such too, there might be some resistance for that coming up and stuff too as well. It's just something to be prepared for and stuff, right? So I'm not sure I'm not 100% sure what everyone else is doing right now, right? But for me, I'll still try to help out where I can and stuff too, right? So
Well, they still have that condos.ca guys, or what, not condos.ca, but they have the condo docs.ca, whatever they are, that do automatically read them for people.
Yeah.
Rhiannon, you've used that before, haven't you? Have you used those guys? Tell me about that a little bit so we can share that with Aaron, so he can. You're on, I can't hear you. You're on mute or something. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you. Okay, well, you're out.
I can tell you about that, Doug. We've had presentations where the software company comes in, you scan the documents to them, and the software has as an AI, knows what to look for, gives you a brief Coles Notes report. If you guys are old enough to understand what Coles Notes are, and it's a summary, but you can't rely on it. It's just someone doing a quick proofread of a report, strata minutes and stuff, and they're picking out some hot topics.
All right, thanks, Mike. So, well, Aaron, why don't you kind of take us through what your report covers?
I follow the Home Inspector Association of British Columbia, so there is a standard for that, and the reason the standards exist is because otherwise, I find when you deal with people, standards changes from person to person. We have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, right? But in general, that you're going to get a report that covers the exterior envelope, so roof, visible parts of foundation, like cladding and such. You're going to get information about the interior, so we're going to test the heat system. Where I personally test the appliances. Make sure that any inspector you deal with do test appliances. Not every inspector does. We use part of infrared cameras, so we'll scan for overheats on the panel. We'll scan for operation of the heating system. We'll do moisture scans of the bathroom tiles, and you'll get a report. Usually our reports come out the same day, and they are pretty quick, sometimes in the evening, depending how busy we are and such too, but generally the same day nonetheless. And a lot of recommendations are put in a report based on what we see on the day and such too. We typically will put deficiencies in for major components, so things that are going to threaten safety or perform some or cause some sort of damage on the property. Typically, cosmetic items do not get in a report. People have asked me, like, what about scratches here or blinds here? I may note them as I find them, but generally they're not considered deficiencies on the overall grand scale of things and such too as well, right? So all reports do have pictures. I don't think any inspectors are doing reports without pictures now, but if they are, please be careful. And they're all done electronically and they all come by email and such.
Right now, how often do you get on the, like every time I've done one, I've been able to get on the roof, but how these apartments, have you been able to get up on most of them? or
I say it's
you able-
50-50, honestly. That's a good question, right? So I tell people, like, people ask me to come on the roof and I say, look, we can ask, but it's 50-50 that if Strata lets us on, right? If we can get on, that'd be great, right? But I wouldn't try and change the world just to get on the roof. I mean, some Stratas are just flat out resistant to it. And they'll give us whatever reason they want. Sometimes they say liability. Sometimes they say I really think just people are lazy. And it's funny you ask that, Doug, like, if you remember, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, not even, maybe 6-7 years ago, it was everyone let you on the roof. It was only in the last like 5 or 6 years that people have been very resistant to like even just doing it. And for whatever reason, right? Sometimes I see
Fire's
people,
been jumping off the top.
I guess all those inspectors are just get up there and we just can't help ourselves, I guess, or something, right? So, but I've had everything under the sun too. I see Sanjan, you raise your hand. I've had everything under the sun. People ask me for my work safe, sure, I'll give it. I've had people say we'll let you on, but it costs $250, and then I send it back to my buyers. I'm like, you want to pay $250 for me to go on the roof and so forth, right? So.
Yeah. All right, thanks,
Quick question about the Aaron, for you. I know every time you go in apartments or houses, there's sometimes the if it's a brand new build, the building shifts, the house shifts, and people see the cracks in the drywall and cracks in the drywall tape gets cracked. So is that dangerous, or is it just a kind of normal, or because a lot of people ask me, I said it's not a big deal, it's just a shifting of the building, right?
Yeah, and for the most part, you're right. I'd say 98% of the time, this normal and stuff too. There is a pattern of cracks that we start to get worried about, depending what the crack looks like, and it's really hard to quantify. There's lots of different ways cracks do. But generally, you're right. Tape lines are a normal part of the process. Even nails coming down, like nail pops, that's a normal part. That usually freaks people out a little bit. They think the drywall is going to fall. And I'm like, no, the drywall's not going to fall. Don't worry. It is. And I tell a lot of people during when I do inspections for new properties, within the first year, I would expect this to happen, right? Now, good developers will generally come in and fix it. But I have to be honest, developers are not obligated to fix it. There's nothing in the guidelines that says developers must fix nail pops that come down. There's something in the guidelines. I'll use nail pops as an example. There's something in the guidelines that says nail pops have to be repaired when they're in a small group, but not as they appear, right? So, if the developer, I tell people on the initial deficiency walkthrough, ask the developer, will you come fix these things after? And get them to say yes or no, or whatever they're going to say, and then you kind of know what they're going to do, and then hopefully they'll live up to their obligations and such too, right? So, but they are cosmetic.
Our man had his hand up. I don't know if he's still here. He kind of disappeared. Our man, you there?
Yeah, you don't see me?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, you're in the corner. So you moved around. You moved from the bottom to the top. I don't know.
Yeah, the cameras keep flipping
No,
around,
it's
so we
here.
don't. So, yes, Armin, how you doing?
I have a question. From what I have seen, I think recently something changed regarding the depreciation report for the developers.
Yeah.
Apparently, I think the developers from the beginning they have to come up with the depreciation report at the completion. Is that something new?
On completion?
Yeah,
That
building the pre-sale when they sell it. So at the completion when they give the
I know
buyers.
there's been a change in how the depreciation report. Now Stratas used to have to could vote no, but now that's no longer the case. They have to get a depreciation report. I think it's every 5 years, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard developers are obligated to prepare a depreciation report prior to a development completing. Has anyone else heard of that? That's the first I've heard of it. So.
Yeah, I got the email from BCFSA was talking about that. I don't know if it's effective in the future, but I believe it was something like developers should come up with the depreciation report at the beginning of the completion as well.
Well,
for like 5 years.
For the next 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I mean, I think if developers were to do that, I mean, developers should also like, you know, repair what they need to repair too as well. I mean, there's a whole conversation on what developers should do and shouldn't do and such too as well. But it would be a nice thing, right? At least I mean, really, I have to kind of push. Really, a depreciation report, and I stress it to everybody, it is not a deficiency report. Like a depreciation report is not that, right? It is, no one creates a depreciation report by doing a full inspection of the components. They just don't do it. A depreciation report is really just for capital planning, and that's it. I tell people like the information, the service lives and depreciation part, they're estimates. Some things are very subjective. Some things are a little bit more, you know, sensitive to time frame, but they're just estimates. So at least Strata can have an idea how they can plan their contingency fund levels and stuff too for these projects. But it's not going to be 100% accurate, right? So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, no, that's the first I've heard of it. I'll have to look into that. I'm gonna ask.
No,
Haas some
actually,
questions.
so I'm just reading the bulletin right now,
Yeah.
and what it actually says is that they're requiring developers to provide funding, not the actual report.
Oh, good. Thank you, Ann. The funding as in like a funding model or just like
Funding
No,
for the
funding
depreciation
actual
report.
money put aside to actually get the report done, but not to provide the report.
oh, got it. Okay. So they want the funding ready to get the report done on initial construction. Okay. All right. That's interesting. Huh. That's super. I'm trying to think in my head like how that, so I guess the developer would have to kick in some money to get it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'll like I said, I'll have to look into it. That's interesting. That's the first I've heard of it, right? So, but that does change things, right? So just
Well, BCFSA has a way of doing things with sneaking things in there, so no.
yeah, I know. Developers just gonna love the fact that they have to put more money aside for development. I'm sure.
Well, we have to do
that'll roll
tons
well.
of paperwork now too, so.
So I'm sure that'll roll well with developers, right? So,
Yeah.
all right, guys. Is there any other questions I can answer before I get going and stuff? So.
I think we're good, Aaron. Thank you. Thanks for.
No,
for-
thanks. It's been very
appreciate it. Always
informal.
good seeing you.
Sorry.
Always good seeing you.
Oh, good seeing. Sorry, I thought there was a question. Yeah, it's been very informal today, and I feel like that's just the way the conversation rolled today and stuff too. So I'm kind of glad, right? So
Perfect.
yeah,
Great
perfect.
job.
You know, if you guys have any questions, I put my contact information. I answer questions offline all the time. People send me scenarios all the time. Feel free to text me, email me, call me. And yeah, then I'll help out where I can and stuff too. I don't usually invoice for questions. Don't worry. If people need to run something by me, just go for it and stuff too. So
Yeah, that's really appreciated. We've got a lot of new realtors and,
Yeah.
oftentimes they need a professional opinion and
yeah,
I appreciate your being available for them.
yeah, of course.
It's
of course.
a very
Okay.
good service.
Okay, thanks guys. Thanks. Everyone have a great day out there.